most people. So yeah, it's like a little simple microcontroller that you can write simple C++ programs for, and it can talk to sliders and sensors, and it can output, for instance, RS-232 that then goes into that. And that was amazing, because that box cost me about 500 quid. That box cost me about 20 quid, maybe. And I had to try and get this kind of capability. The cheapest thing I had found was like an order of magnitude beyond that. You know, we're talking about kind of rack mount stuff that when we were kind of doing gigs abroad, you know, we'd have to basically book in a flight case, and that was just, you know, that wasn't looking fun. And then this thing came out, and it was amazing. And so, and it worked. It kind of premiered at this gig that we had in Brazil, and so it was amazing that I had this kind of, I had my laptop that did all the kind of the video art, whatever. But then kind of, I also had this like laptop-sized thing, this laptop kind of priced thing that allowed us, me and my, that's me, and that's Mike, and it allowed us to kind of jam together doing all this kind of video art stuff, just in the way that the musician was quite used to kind of jamming with other people and using mixers and whatever. But that side of this is not really what we're here to talk about tonight. We're here to talk about this wonderful graph. So, the proof of concept for this thing was 4 lines of code, basically copied and pasted out of a manual. And then, to actually get something that worked at that kind of Brazil gig, so it did the crossfader, but it also did a few other things, like it could set specific resolutions and whatever. It took 100 lines of code. And just to kind of give an example of just how, you know, when you're trying to make something real, simple things get more complicated. So this is the one of those 4 lines of code in the proof of concept. And so with this little box, it's kind of got like a debug mode when you're remote controlling it. And the debug mode just says, forget about the checksum, and if you just wait 1/10 of a second, I'll have forgotten about everything, and you can just give me a new command. And so that's what that proof of concept did. So as I would move the crossfader across, every 1/10 of a second, the Arduino would wake up, see where the crossfader was, send that number down the cable, go to sleep for another 1/10 of a second. Which kind of is fine, it works, but it doesn't give you that kind of butter smooth fading. But this does. And it's a lot more, you know, it's a lot more complicated. But also what's nice about this is that you start here, and that's fine, and you basically, you know, it doesn't take too much, you know, you can work that out by yourself. But then kind of enthused by that, even if you've never bit shifted in your life or whatever, you can then, you know, you start to get drawn towards it, and you figure it out, and then you have something like that, and you feel like a hero, because all of a sudden you've pulled a magic trick, and not only have you made a high definition mixer, but it's actually kind of now buttery smooth. But yeah, you know, we started here with 4, and now we're here with 100. We'll see where we get to. So that was very briefly my personal project. That worked for me. You know, it could have just stopped there. But the problem was, whenever I met kind of my peers, they saw it and they lost their minds and they wanted one too. And so I got home from that gig and I kind of doodled up a little, maybe this is real. I didn't pick the number out of the air, you know, it was grounded in some thoughts, but, you know, it's just me kind of going, well, I don't know, internet, see what you think of this. And the internet liked it, which was great. And I mean, I do have an advantage here in that, you know, this is a niche, you know, there is a community of practitioners, you know, so I kind of had a bit of a captive market. And yeah, and so I thought this would be simple. So this Arduino that I had used wasn't actually a true Arduino. It was a clone, because an Arduino is open source, and so you can kind of get variants that other companies have made. And I got this variant with an RS-232 socket instead of a USB socket. And I thought, well, basically, you just take that design that they've got, and you find the right size box, and the box has got grooves in it, and so you just kind of expand out that PCB, just keeping all the electronics where they are in the middle to fit into the grooves, and then wherever you want your buttons and stuff, you know, you make the holes in the PCB, and instead of having soldering wires, you put the traces through the PCB. And so I was like, this is great, you just copy and paste it, you expand the border, and then you just join the dots between some buttons, and it's going to be fine. Of course it wasn't. I emailed the people who made that free Arduino thing, never heard anything back, and in the interests of brevity, we're going to skip over a few years of the weeds. But here is a metaphor for that whole thing. So I was invited, so somebody doing the visuals for an Apex Twin gig, as you imagine, the visuals there are kind of crazy. Lots of computers doing weird face swapping and whatever. And so he heard about the mixer. He thought that would really help him. He obviously has some kind of particular, well, the visuals guy has some particular needs, and I wanted to go to the gig. So I said yes, and I said, you know, I will come and support it, and I will, you know, while we're there, I'll do whatever specific work needs to be made just to tailor it to exactly to your needs. And so this was great. We sound checked. It all worked. All my last minute tweaks, you know, were what was required. And then the actual gig starts sometime later, and the guy kind of, you know, fades up, and nothing happens, which is really bad. And basically, I, after 5 minutes of just going, what the hell is going on here, realized that the chip, the microcontroller chip in the middle of the board had vibrated out due to the base of the warm-up axe. And also because it was a prototype, it wasn't in a proper box. I hadn't quite laser cut the ends yet, so the chip had then vibrated out of the box and off the desk. So I did find the chip, and you know, halfway through the gig, there's going to be going, look! But by that point, you know, it's too late. All trust has been blown. And so it's kind of funny, and it was bad, and it is a nice metaphor for the time that passed. But it also told me that actually doing kind of projects, prototypes for yourself is fun, but actually like production hardware is really good. You know, cases that are properly made so that bits don't fall out, and you know, kind of chips that are properly soldered in because you're not ripping them out all the time to program them and then put them back in, you know, have definite advantages, are going to be more durable. So this is where an intervention happened, and I was at university doing a PhD where, amusingly enough, I did some social robotics. Yeah, and so basically this guy said, screw the fact that, you know, it hadn't been working out with these collaborators who were going to do the hardware with you or whatever. You can do it all yourself. And here's just the first things you need to know, and you know, come back when you've done this. And this was quite the intervention, and so now I'm going to try and do a little bit the same to you. So this is what I thought I was going to do. There's the Arduino, and there's the case. But actually, one of the things we learned in those years where things weren't going right is that we kind of pushed the Arduino too far, and it just didn't work anymore. But there's like the Arduino is a bit kind of Fisher-Price, but there's this thing called an embed, which was amazing. And so let's not use the Arduino, let's use an embed. And so now, look, it's much smaller, there's much more space to do stuff, and it's got lots more pins that do more powerful things. And we just wire the pins in to the sockets. But how do we know which pin is which? Well, in the PCB design tool, they actually give you the kind of drawing that tells you exactly what all the pins are. And so here is serial, so that's my RS-232 output, so pin 9 and pin 10, that's the ones that I need to just hook up to the socket. And here's the socket, and when you look up RS-232 on the internet, you get a PDF for the chip, and it says you have to draw this, so you draw it. And all you need to do is give things the same name. So that is the transmit pin, and that is the transmit pin, and I give them the same name. And then, so this is your kind of logical schematic diagram. So this is where you figure out how it should work. And then you kind of flip round to physically an actual board. And now all of those things that I gave the same names to are joined by yellow lines. And then you just kind of drag them around. And the reason I'm kind of showing you this is because I had no idea that this was possible. This was just, you know, doing electronics was a complete, just way beyond my, you know, even thought of competency. But if you can use a computer, if you can code, you can absolutely do this too. And especially if you can code and put all the cleverness on that, then just putting that cleverness in a little physical shell, however it needs to be, is way more achievable than you may have thought. And also, if you have OCD of any form, going between this and this is really good. You spend a lot of time getting that just so. And so that is, here we are. So this hasn't got a screen, it hasn't got much whatever, but that is the basic thing where the brain is wired into power and it's wired into the RS-232 socket, and because the embed board is cool, I can just give it an Ethernet socket, just wire the pin straight into it, and now I can do Ethernet too. And so the final thing kind of looked like that, which looks a bit complicated, but it's actually not very, and all the complicated bits like that are basically copied and pasted out of PDFs. For, you know, you need to have a screen. The PDF that comes with the screen says, well, you need a few of these bits and bobs as well on your board where you plug in. So you can do electronics too. So yeah, one of the reasons I thought I couldn't do electronics is because if you've ever seen that kind of thing, you know, where like they have that white block with all of the multicolored cables going into it, that really confuses me. And I can't look at that and kind of pass what is going on. Whereas with this, and with that kind of schematic view, you know, in the comfort of your own home, at your desk, on a large screen, with a cup of coffee, whatever, you can really kind of, you've got the time and the space to figure it out and kind of see it in its most kind of logical, clear form, as opposed to just this jumble of wires, including that one that you accidentally knocked out, but you didn't quite realize, and now the whole thing's not working. And so there's a theme here, which is that if you design things on a computer, it's making things real is really quite easy, because you can, like with laser cutting, for instance, laser cutting is precise and repeatable. So you might need to, you know, do a control, you know, the fascia for your little box, or cut out a hole for a socket or whatever. And if I was making that by hand, I would just be bodging it, and I wouldn't have it quite right. And then the next one, I'd have to kind of put a bit over, but then I'd make some other mistake, and I'd always be kind of chasing my tail. But if you do it on the computer and then you get it laser cut, you get the perfect shapes, but it's 0.5 millimeter out. Well, on the computer, you just nudge it over 0.5 millimeter, you get the laser cutter to cut it out again, and it has moved precisely 0.5 millimeter, and nothing else has changed. So you really can kind of iteratively design, which kind of sounds trivial, but it's so transformative for actually making things. And it's a bit like this is a tangent, well, let's not go on a tangent. So what else should you do and can't you do? So I designed the PCB, but at that point there was no way that I was going to do all the soldering of these tiny components to it. But there are companies that will do that for you. And you know, there are big online services that will do it, but also there's just, back then there was a guy called Bob. Bob had an industrial unit and friends at a factory, and he had a really good price, and you know, it was just a pleasure getting these things made. And I mean, it cost me 500 quid or so to get 2 of these boards made up, which was more money than I was willing, than I wanted to spend. But at that point, I actually thought, sod it, I am going to sell some of these. And just, it's that knowledge that what comes back professionally will be an exact reflection of my design rather than the bodge, the mistakes that I made in making it. So if it works because my design was right. And if it doesn't work, I can work out through my design why it doesn't work rather than troubleshooting the fact that I candidly messed up some soldering. And it did work. It doesn't look like it's working, but it is working because that's static on that screen basically, and it has powered up correctly. And it's just not displaying anything because I haven't written the device driver yet. And device driver sounds scary, but the minute when you started on that journey that starts with delay 100 and then goes into bit shifting and whatever, actually, writing the SPI commands, again with a bit of copying and pasting from the internet, becomes, again, a challenge, but it's doable. It's all kind of incremental steps up. And that's a really nice moment where you're kind of like, oh, I'm almost there, and clearly, a few bits are in the wrong place, but look, that's writing. That's the font that I made. And there is just one amusing thing here, which is that there is the phrase square peg in a round hole. The embed has got square pegs, and the little kind of socket things I spec'd on the board for it to go into had round holes. Hence, fly leads going from there to there, which was a little bit embarrassing, but so it goes. So that was the final design. It's got some more stuff up here now, but it worked. And there it was. And so that was all the kind of the physical design. At the same time, I've been developing this whole menu system and everything to drive it. So let's return to our wonderful graph. So we're 3 steps in now. So at this point, we have something that works well enough to demonstrate it in a video. And so we know that we started off with 4, then we went to 100. So where are we now? So we know this is the 4 lines. So this is the 100 lines. And now this is the main application file. But that's not it. So that's the library that drives the video processor. That's my menu system. That's a fix for the menu knob. That's my driver for the display, and that's the font. And so now, we've gone from 4 to 100 to 2,000 lines of code. And that's just the code. Lines of code isn't reflective, la 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 la. But it just shows you just how to go from something that's good enough for you towards something that's good enough for other people. There's so much work. And having made a thing, so we should talk about exactly why I designed the thing that I designed. So to elaborate the slide, we have hands-on controls because the DJ needs the crossfader. And even if I wasn't a DJ, even if it was just me and Sept, if there was a crossfader there, it's a very good interface because it shows me that it's faded to me, that my laptop is live, or it's faded to him, his laptop is live. We have menu for all the complicated stuff because digital video is complicated and there are lots of settings and stuff that you have to get right. And then we have the firmware that makes the whole package kind of just work. So we have the software that I've put on my controller that makes the experience good for the user, and we have the tweaks I do to the firmware on the video processor to give it some custom resolutions that video artists like. Now, if I had spent longer in the introduction, you would have seen this box already. So this is what we all had before high definition video came along. When video was like, when it was like, had the 3 cables with the red and the white and the yellow sockets on from your camcorder and whatever. When it was like that, we had these video mixers and everybody loved them. And so in those wilderness years, after I'd kind of announced that it was possible, but before I'd actually got things together and was going for it by myself, these people came out. And this looks exactly like what you just saw there. It's got all the hands-on controls you could possibly want. And then if you look at it closely, well, you wouldn't know this, but that is the back of that little black box video processor that I had that they've shoved in there. So they have basically had the same idea as me. And what's interesting about this is that we can now kind of compare and contrast. In my reading of their product, they have super hands-on controls, so they get 2 ticks. They do have lots of menu input-output stuff there. They do have the multi-screen settings. But what they don't have is the kind of the just worksness. And what they didn't realize is that the most fundamental feature of making this kind of video mixer with that video processor is just to get the damn thing to work at the most basic level, just so that you can actually plug in the screen, the projector, whatever, and have an output on it. It sounds silly, but if you've ever sat there with a projector trying to get an image up on it, you will know, that these things, a lot can be just slightly screwy, and it doesn't work. And so so not having an output is a deal breaker. So they didn't anticipate how fragile the setup of the processor is, how just, the tiniest tweak of a setting, or when it turns on, it forgets something, how that can completely ruin your day. But also, in doing that, this video processor has got buttons on the front of it, and that's how you use it in the last resort. And that, now, the fragile setup of the processor, you can fix that in software. In your remote control, you can put in behaviors and checks and hand-holding things to kind of straighten all that out. But if you've shoved those buttons inside the box and taken away the thing of no resort, that's an unrecoverable error, and your hardware design is fundamentally flawed because of that. So that's one difference. So on mine, my remote control was separate. If my remote control had a BIS built over it and it completely died, you still had the video processor by itself. You could use it just as it was. So that was one thing there. But also, and this is reflected in this very nice review. And but actually, this double tick is a cross, because again, what these people did, basically, this interface is a check that it cannot cache. What they didn't understand is that when you have that one RS-232 cable going from your controller to the thing, and the way that protocol, the specific protocol is specified, about the maximum amount of control that you can throw down there in real time is the crossfade. If you try and do anything more than that, you're just trying to chuck too much down the pipe, and the whole thing becomes jittery. So they didn't understand the constraints of the processor. And what's more, in doing that, this box was really expensive because it's got all these buttons. There's so much more going on here. Each one of these buttons is not cheap in itself. And so they've greatly increased the price for a faster horse in an era of cars. So the whole point where I was coming from is that you have all this really interesting software on your laptop that produces really nuanced, beautiful, audio-reactive stuff. And then the mixer is just there more as a my turn, your turn. And it's more of a, we can go and sound check, we can check that everything works, we can know that our signal from our desk to the projectors stays good, and then we can unplug the laptops and go for dinner and plug them back in, knowing that that link hasn't been broken. And again, I have this nice review, says this very nicely. And so the punchline here is that this review was actually written by one of the people who helped make this mixer, which shows just how small a scene it is. But I think also, you know, deserves some time and respect that they got there. You know, that they said such things. So at the heart, I mean, although I made a physical thing and whatever, really what I did was I did a kind of a user experience job on a really awkward bit of existing hardware. So that's your product, right? Except that actually it's not. It's really just a prototype, and the product is a whole new stage before we even get to the business. So if you have a prototype, the spark diffuser lets you crossfade between video, and if you have a demonstration video, you can make a product website. And with a product website, you need a price. So to make your product, you've got the PCB drawing, you've got the shopping list that goes with the PCB. Together with the PCB, you've got the drawing for where the holes, that the things that sit on the PCB are going to stick out. And then you've got your firmware. So how do you get a price? Well, this is the point where you start getting quotes for manufacturing and logistics. So again, you go back to people like Bob with his industrial unit and his friends in factories, and you shop around, and you come up with a price. And so you have your drawings, you have some quotes, you have your information website, at which point you're ready to make it real. So you need to register yourself a company. You need to make an online store, and you really should have had a mailing list. So when I started that in 2009, I got 163 expressions of interest. In the intervening years, that had gone up to 430. You get some media coverage. Again, it helps that I was kind of in a niche, and so, you know, people wanted this thing. They were very happy to talk about it. And so with all that,
can I just ask,
yes.
Do you need any sort of electrical safety certification?
Good question. And there will be a point where that becomes relevant.
Okay.
So if I don't remember to point it out, remind me. And so 430, you take a deep breath, turned into 80 orders, which I don't know what you were expecting. I was kind of a little bit disappointed. I thought maybe there would be more. And also, I knew that if I could buy 100 was kind of when the price breaks really came. So if I got over 100, it was going to work out so much better for me. But nonetheless, £50,000 in the bank on the basis of a video ain't bad. I mean, I wasn't, my kind of personal identity was so tied up with getting this thing out there by this point, I would have just done it regardless. But you know, 50 grand is enough to work with, right? So at that point, you need to start making purchase orders for your controllers, purchase orders for your processors. You don't need the quotes anymore. And you need to start making whole new things, because even though you had your prototype, that's not your finished product. So whereas before I just had those holes cut out as per my drawing, now I actually need to do a design to go, you know, to label the buttons and whatever. But it's super satisfying when they come back. I needed a sticker, so that generic, the video processor that I bought that I'm putting my custom tweaks on, I wanted to make that my own. So I made a sticker, and our old defuse sticker got replaced with this lovely new one. I needed to package it, which meant I needed packaging tape. The minimum order for packaging tape is quite a lot. So I'm newly in Bristol, and I've moved house, and all our packing boxes are wrapped like this. It's quite beautiful. You need to kind of do all the packaging inserts. I think out of this whole project, the thing that like literally kept me up at night, just with the ideas spinning in my head, was how to do the origami, just to fit it all in. And so that's 100 packaging inserts there, where, you know, I nearly died sitting in a basement with a laser cutter for a day. You need to do all sorts of things. You need a test rig, you need your assembly documents, you need a test procedure, you need your lovely stickers. I wrote quality control checked which is actually, if you think about it, pointless. It needs to say, it has been checked, but did it pass? That's what counts. With all of those, you can end up, you go to a factory and you see lovely things like this. It makes me very happy to see my silly little logo on things. So we were here, and let's just tidy that up a bit. So here is the product, here is the business, and so now we've just added all of those drawings and documents in, except it's not quite this simple because there's loads going on. You are writing so many emails at this point. Between your suppliers, telling your customers that I said it was going to be 4 weeks, but actually it's going to be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can imagine. And you all know that the last 10% takes 90%. And because we started with code, let's have a look at some more. So the core, this product is a crossfader. You would not believe how late in the process I realized that my crossfader algorithm was wrong. So again, it gets longer. This was the first one. And then actually as it shipped was that. And that was me just trying to get my head around it. So this is the culmination of the graph. 400, 2,000, question mark, 5,000. So, I mean, that's what it took. I mean, if ever, people have said that shipping products is hard, there's your graph. And I said, with that kind of Aphex Twin gig, that it's no good having a prototype yourself. It is only at this point that this happens. It's a happy day when you actually hold this thing in your own hand. But obviously at that point, people have pledged lots of money to you, so you better get the things out to them, which means going to Bob's industrial unit and actually shipping the things out. And it's super satisfying when you get photos back from like this gig in Australia, where you're like, oh, wow. So, and that actually was the first order that came in. So only at this point is it a product. But at this point also, so I am super happy, I kind of pledged myself to the internet that I will give you this thing, and I was prepared to some degree to lose money on it. If I only got 5 orders and the minimum order for the cases was 25, then, so be it. The cases are not so expensive. To be done with this thing, I was prepared to go there. But, it did work out, so that was nice, and it could have just stopped here. But it didn't, and that's where we get to business, because that really wasn't a business. That was a kind of a one-off thing, very much, kind of just with, I guess, my ego just, determined to make it happen. So let's see where we are in terms of a business now. So what we have are all of those drawings, and we have a company, and we have the website, and we have Bob with his industrial unit and the makers of that video processor, both of whom are in the UK, by the way. It's really, this was all kind of done on the South Coast. So, it's surprising. You think you might have to go to China for all of this. You don't. And I got $5,000 in the bank out of that. So, I have earned $5,000 more easily, shall we say. But out of all this, where is the value? Where is the business prospect? Well, it's not the money you have in the bank, really. The business prospect is that this is a verified design. They've already made this once, and they know that it works. You have the contacts who can make it happen, and you have a mailing list with 100 people now going, oh, I saw that you did that, but your limited Kickstarter style pre-sale period is ended. I missed it. Can I have one? And so basically, you can say to these people, I have 100 people who want to buy one, and then maybe they'll basically almost do it for you, and that's what we're going to talk about. So the business prospect here is that you have a verified design, you have the industrial contacts, and you have the lure of more. But this verified design thing is worth talking about. So at the beginning, I said that the initial idea was to take that Arduino clone and just kind of copy and paste the design into our own rectangle. That seems trivial, right? We are used to copying and pasting on computers, and it just worked. Basically, that lost us 2 years. I just, that verified design went to unverified just because of weird hidden reasons that we're still to this point not entirely sure about. But one way or the other, they really knocked the momentum out of the whole product, out of the whole project. So yeah, like I added one extra menu item to that menu system, and it would make, and the firmware and the whole controller would just freeze completely unaccountably. And basically, in the end, I realized I had a kind of stack heap collision on the controller. So, I didn't even realize just how close I was to the edge with the thing that I had that was working. And I kind of added this in Kickstarter terms, what would be a stretch goal. And it passed all the tests, and I was like, check me out, electronic engineer. I've got this to work. This is amazing. But then basically, when I tried using it for real, I realized that particular bit overheated. And so it actually started giving screwy results. So a verified design is way more fragile and way more valuable than you think, because it's so easy to turn something that the manufacturers know can work into something that just in terms of actually making a sale has no value at all and will actually cost you, because you then have to correct all those mistakes. So we have a verified design and the industrial contacts. So how do we make this work? It's like a puzzle. The first thing to say is that all this intellectual property that I've made is not really mine. I mean, technically it is mine, but for all intents and purposes, it's Bob's, because he has the logistics to make it all happen, to package them up, to send them out. He has the relationships with the factory. It's only that factory that the documents really fit. The factory has its own kind of more detailed document than the one I gave them that specifies exactly the procedure for making it. So even though I own that intellectual property, it only has meaning with those existing suppliers. So, essentially, I'm out of that loop. So we are in the situation where Bob can make the controller widgets. So that's the one thing we're manufacturing. TV1 have the processor widgets waiting, and they want to sell lots of them. So we can buy lots of them and put them together with our made controller widgets, and then we have the package. And Bob, because he has the unit, and because it's the thing that we're making is cheaper than the thing we're buying. So the thing that he would make, to do this retail, you have to make them up front and then have them waiting until you've sold. So he can actually make the cheaper thing in big production run batches up front, and then we can buy in the expensive thing a bit more on demand. So he can actually do the retail logistics and front the money for that production run, which is good. But at this point, really, I've just got customer trust. And so I'm actually really out of the loop. Bob can just buy the processors. He can take all the money from the customers and send it out and do everything. So I'm basically just sitting over here doing nothing. I'm not in that loop, so it's not going to work. I'm not going to have the control that I want. And how the hell do I get my cut? So that's not going to work. But this is what I figured out, is that one of the things I skipped earlier for the sake of brevity is that for that processor, as well as these few custom resolutions that artists like, I actually basically got them to tweak some of the blend modes so it works a bit more like Photoshop. And so I actually had this intellectual property that was just mine. it made sense in the context of me, because I knew I could buy these processors and I could flash that firmware on myself, and I could stick my nice little sticker on the top to make instead of a kind of a TV1 video processor, I could then make a Toby Spark, a Toby video processor. So this is what we did. So the other problem is I need to get a big price. I need to order in bulk. I need to order the video processors in bulk, because then I get bulk pricing, and it's bulk pricing that basically makes it possible for me to sell these at an affordable price. But I don't have the cash flow to buy 100 in advance. And there's a thing called a call-off order, which I didn't know about, which basically says, TV1, I pledge to you that I will buy 100, so give me the 100 pricing, but we're going to buy them in smaller batches on an ongoing basis. And the reason that exists is because they want to sell them. And the minute you actually have a personal relationship and they've seen you buy 50 of them already, you don't even need to kind of get into credit arrangements or whatever. You can work out these kind of, how can we make it work for each other? So I bought those. I applied my special sauce. I then sold them on to Bob, who then assembled the whole widget. He sold them retail, and there's this kind of aligned interest. There's this virtuous flow, and if Bob isn't selling enough, I want to make my profit on those, so I do some marketing. And if Bob is selling enough, then maybe I want to do some more marketing to make even more money. So that was the kind of the business model problem solution. And so that's kind of it. And this is how it was over time. So it took from 2009 to 2012, kind of futzing about till basically somebody told me, you can just do this yourself and just go for it. At which point it took me, I don't know, half a year to pull all that stuff together. And then it took a few months to make them all and to take the money, get them made, ship them out. At which point Bob is quite excited by this whole thing. And he's like, we could do this retail. And I'm like, let's do it. And so that starts. And then 3 more production runs later, in November 2015, we sold out. Or is that 2016? Maybe. I can't even remember now. But a little detail here. So even if we hadn't done that the whole retail thing, it shipped with kind of okay firmware. Pretty quickly, I did a good firmware update. But then half a year later, kind of the final firmware. So even, there was still, I wasn't working full time on this for 6 months afterwards, but there's still a lot of work even at the point that they're not yours anymore. And this is the slide that you never see. So this is a modest success, and it's now over. And if it was a stratospheric success, it'd still be a going concern, and we'd be trying to do stuff, and you'd never, ever know what the accounts are. And if it was a failure, then I wouldn't want to be talking about it now. But because it's a modest success, I can actually show you what the accounts were. So it basically took about $2,000 to make that prototype. And you can spend more or less doing that. And I was at university and I found a bit of like entrepreneurship funding. So they actually gave me $1.5 grand to help pay for things. So I only lost 500 quid on that. And then I kind of got 50 grand I didn't do a Kickstarter because I didn't really need to advertise. I already had a kind of a captive market, and Kickstarter will take a commission. So I thought if I don't have to pay that commission, I'm not going to. Which then had some fun with PayPal, but we'll ignore that for now. But anyway, so roughly 53 in, 46 out. So for all that work, that product by itself kind of netted about $7,000, but that's pre-tax. I haven't paid myself. There's generic business stuff that you want to do and that I did that takes money out of that. And then for those few years of retail afterwards, I earned 22 grand. So that's kind of a poor year's salary for what probably amounts to a year's work, but it's obviously not all in 1 year. So I would thoroughly advise you all to develop software at a lucrative daily rate rather than doing this. But it is satisfying that, it kind of was good. I mean, I was doing a PhD, and that paid for a fair chunk of my writing up time. And so that's a slide that you never see, and we're almost there. So why did this work? And this relates to your question. So I think one reason that this whole thing was successful is that I was extending an existing product, and that in doing that, it kind of anchors expectations. So because I wasn't making the whole widget, because I was extending this, and people, they could go to the website of that manufacturer and kind of see that it's legit. They can find not the bulk price, but the retail price for that product online. And so if you're kind of just augmenting that, people kind of have an expectation of, oh, it's going to work because the thing it's based on works, and it's going to cost in this ballpark. I mean, you will get, you just get people just going, can't you make it for 50 quid or whatever? And you're like, no. And that really is just a shortcut, for all of those awkward conversations. And in this whole, there's a kind of longer version of this talk where this is a bit more explicit, but it's this just slow, gradual process of trying to make something more believable for people. To the point where they'll punt up some money just for a video on the internet, to on and on and on. And again, just starting off with that product just made it so much more believable in everybody else's minds. And another reason it worked is that it had this kind of very DIY, hacking kind of community kind of start. But then there was kind of the separate phase that was free of that. And so at the beginning, because I'd taken like 3 years in not actually getting this to the market, and people had cottoned on to the fact that this video processor was a thing and could be useful, like quite a few people I respected had bought the black box but didn't have my controller, and were fed up with the black box because they didn't have my controller, but they didn't want to then buy another black box as a package from me. And I also thought that because I'd kind of hacked this together and I made the software open source and whatever, that I thought other people would want to come in and kind of extend it and do all sorts of cool things with it that I hadn't seen. So the first run was kind of stuck very much in that world, and it was a complete hassle. Nobody extended anything, and the support for dealing with people who hadn't just taken their processor that I'd personally set up and then tried to match the two together it wasn't huge, but it was a burden. And it really would have made the whole thing unsustainable if we continue with that. So kind of, I had to do something that was true to how the project was in that point of time, but then kind of drawing a line under that turned out really to be necessary. And what relates to that is that the pricing of that by itself is kind of arbitrary. People have no idea what it really costs you to make it. And also you, to some degree, have no idea what it will cost you to make it, because the price between making 5 will lose you money, making 25 will cost the maximum amount, and then if you hit 100 or 200, then it really, starts to crater quite quickly. So the actual price it costs you is really variable. So if you just sell that by itself, you have no kind of sensible way of setting people's expectations on what is a reasonable price for your product. You're clawing at the margins. Your manufacturer will make it, they will want their cut, you will want your cut. Whereas if you sell it as a package, so at this point, it just works. You get it out the box and it works, because I've done my magic on the processor. They're already set up to completely expect one another. And because it just works, you can charge a premium price, because you're no longer selling a kind of, a hack that I made for myself. So with a premium margin, and the fact that you're selling the package, you're selling more stuff, the overall price is higher. So you have a better percentage on a bigger number. And it sounds so bone dead simple, but that's really important. Like, if you can sell a few really expensive things, it's a lot easier than than having to sell lots of small things, lots of cheap things. And essentially, I earned most of the money on this by being a wholesaler of that processor rather than manufacturing my own thing, which again was, I had no idea that that would be the case at the beginning. So yeah, you want to sell expensive things and you want to work out a way of getting a good margin on them. And so selling expensive things is good unless you end up with a warehouse full of really expensive stock that you can't then sell because the world that's bigger than you releases the thing that they should have released 10 years ago. And so it finally happened. And so one reason this is a modest success is that we quit while we were ahead, which again is, an obvious thing, but you never quite know when that point is. And as it happens, that November 2015 is exactly the same month that we sold our last one. So they didn't come onto the market in that month, but they were announced in that month. So we were, we had chosen to quit, and then that came out, and I was like, whew, there we go. So those are my 4 theories of why it was successful. And this is my final thought. So I don't want this talk to be about like, look how amazing I am, all this stuff. Like, to the extent that this has been about me, it's about you. If you, knowing the audience here, you can do all of that stuff. And even if, it's just a journey and it's all incremental and you just start with something and each of these challenges just happens kind of one at a time and, sooner or later you can find yourself far down the line. And yeah, it wasn't, the most effort, the effort reward, financial reward, I have done better things. But out of everything I've done in my life, this has been kind of the most wholly satisfying. And my final thing is that being new in town, looking for a job. So, I mean, seriously, maybe you here know, but if you know, through your contacts, through your networks, through companies that you know, through people that you meet at lunch, if anybody needs somebody who can code or do product stuff, there you go. So that's my talk. Thank you.
We are out of time. So questions, will you be
Questions for pizza.